Warning: some viewers may find the following content to be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
So, back in 2015, the announcement for a new Powerpuff Girls show was announced. And rightfully speaking, this left a lot of people feeling skeptical about the show, because unless you've been living under a rock, you know that the original Powerpuff Girls series made back in 1998 is one of Cartoon Network's most profitable franchises of all time. However, it's also a series that Cartoon Network have been exploiting for a long time now. Back when the original Powerpuff Girls initially ended after the release of the Powerpuff Girls movie, and Craig McCracken would go on to do Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Cartoon Network decided to forcibly revive the show past the point of expiration by bringing in Chris Savino to do the episodes. This backfired heavily, leaving the show to finally come to a close in 2005. However, Cartoon Network kept on trying its best to revive the series. Specials, an anime done by Cartoon Network Japan, etc. So the announcement for this new series was a huge turnoff for people at the time, and so when the show finally came out on April 4th of 2016, people did not like it, calling it one of Cartoon Network's worst shows of all time. For me, on the other hand, back then, I only watched a few episodes at most, and at the time, I wrote it off as not being the worst thing ever, though that's mainly because of the fact that I didn't keep up with the show all that much, and when I actively tried to seek it out, I had a hard time finding it because I didn't record the episodes on my DVR at the time, and the website that I was using at the time didn't really have the episodes be playable, so I ended up focusing on other things at the time, such as videos, and I was also getting into the Loud House when that show was just getting started. And then when I was making my huge binge list for Sean's network reviews, and decided to do a poll for which shows would get the most votes, this show was a part of poll number 26, and in case you're wondering about the thumbnail for this video, this show was previously in a poll, and I'll say this right now, y'all caught a ripe one, because I'm just gonna say it right now. I am absolutely thankful that I mostly stayed away from this show while it was on, because I don't know what this show could have done to my brain had I continued watching it. To say that this show is bad would be an understatement. This show is horrendous. On my list of shows that I reviewed in Sean's network reviews so far, this show is easily at the bottom of the list. Yep, Thundercats Roar is officially dethroned as the worst animated series that I've ever reviewed. We've got a lot of ground to cover today, and I don't know if even this review will be enough to go over all of what I want to talk about with this show. So let's begin with one of this show's more controversial aspects, and I'm gonna rip the band-aid off: the very alarming content that this show decides to throw in. I know that there's the specific kind of argument that people like to throw around, where a certain series has this writer's barely disguised fetish thrown into it whenever something very suggestive is happening on screen. I personally talked about this back during my review on the Rodfellows movie. Needless to say, in one of the first episodes of this show, called Painbow, it has Blossom and Bubbles, characters that are canonically underage, twerking. And I don't even think that I even need to explain why this is a problem. Making this sequence even worse is that the villain Allegro decides to hypnotize Blossom and Bubbles into doing this against their will, already looking very, very bad on this show's part. Then the series decides to do this again during the episode Somewhere Over the Swing Set, despite how much backlash that they got the first time when they did this. And then the series had a controversy where one of the writers were inserted into the series to be the love interest of Blossom. But according to Shadowstreak, the other writers were the ones who inserted him into the show, which is admittedly relieving, but is a case of them not thinking through how bad that this would look. Blossom having a love interest is not inherently a problem. What is a problem, though, is that they had the character look too much like how he does in real life, as well as having Blossom frequently fantasize about him.
Ooh, but wait! Altogether, the entirety of the show has these moments only happen for a few seconds.
Okay then, well, I'll say this right now. The episode Muscle Cup is the worst episode of the entire series. It literally has every single thing that is wrong with this show wrapped up into one, where Buttercup is not feeling confident in herself because a superhero named Adsman makes fun of her and the other two. So what Buttercup does as a result of this is that she gets super buff by constantly drinking protein shakes and working out. However, she ends up getting too strong to help her sisters when they end up getting captured by the Gnat, who unleashes a bullfrog on Blossom and Bubbles. So Buttercup needs to get rid of her muscles, and apparently the best way for them to be able to do that is Buttercup sitting on a couch in order for her muscles to go away, but she ends up turning into this large glob of goo instead. Just know, I am never watching this episode ever again for as long as I live. I'm just gonna move on. I really don't like talking about these kinds of subjects. I only wanted to bring this up because people would be wondering about this if I didn't. Now, to make this abundantly clear, I by no means necessary am blaming those who worked on the show. The bad apples who worked on the show are absolutely to blame for it.
Julia Beckerman.
But remember, the ones who are innocent are only really doing what Cartoon Network wants them to do. One of the people who created this show, for instance, was Bob Boyle, someone who also created Yin Yang Yo and Wow Wow Wubsy. I remember liking the latter show when I was younger, while the other, I remember just feeling neutral about it. But does all of the alarming content in the show really make it bad by all means necessary? Well, it certainly takes a lot of points off of it, and by default, it makes the episodes that include them absolutely horrendous, especially Painbow and Muscle Cup. But is it like top contender for worst show I reviewed bad? I mean, all of the utterly disgusting implications in this show do only take up a few seconds in a select few episodes after all, outside of the aforementioned Muscle Cup. And plus, bad episodes and bad scenes don't make an entire show bad. Straight Illin from Clarence and Poneapples from It's Pony are the exceptions to those two otherwise underrated shows, not the majority. And from marathoning the entirety of the series, I can confirm that not every episode has these implications. So what makes this show worse than Thundercats Roar, Robot Boy, and Family Dog exactly? Well, that's very easy. One of the biggest issues that I have with Powerpuff Girls 2016,
Outside of its alarming content,
is that it's one of the most soullessly manufactured pieces of garbage that has ever come out of an animation studio, especially one that is as respected as Cartoon Network. Just by watching this series, you can just smell the desperation and corporate meddling that went into the show at every turn. Admittedly, there are some nice looking backgrounds, and the nighttime portions of the series do look very good. But remember, nice looking visuals at points do not make a show, especially one that is as mind-numbing as this show. And I'm not just talking about the fact that this show forces in memes and tries way too hard to be cool. The entire show in general feels try-hard, and that it has this specific attitude about it that just makes the show extremely exhausting to sit through. Booyah! We're not like that girly pony show, or that outdated original version that had the girls in kindergarten. We are hip and with the kids. Even though this show feels a lot more squeaky clean in comparison to the original, most episodes involve the girls either getting hurt or captured, and sometimes not even committing to the action scenes. I could have sworn that this show was actually made in like the 1970s or 80s. The show really is that spineless and has the aura of the network giving into peer pressure because of oversensitive Karens. But the reality of it all is that this show was made in 2016. Around that exact same time, Cartoon Network was offering shows that were taking risks,
for better or for worse.
In fact, more than a year after this show came out, OK KO Let's Be Heroes premiered, and that show had tons of sequences where characters are fighting and getting hurt. A show which I'd much rather be watching right now than this show. The motivation of this show being made as well is very 1980s-esque. Cartoon Network did not care a single bit about this show's quality, or its implications, or the numerous amount of animation mistakes that are in the first season. Cartoon Network only wanted this show so that they could sell toys. And in spite of the fact that the show tries to promote the idea of girl power and wanting to be all progressive and stuff, this show has numerous moments where it repeatedly trips on its heels in regards to what it wants to accomplish. Because the show is as squeaky clean as it is, it makes several decisions that fly in its face. Like, for example, replacing all of the female voice actresses but letting the males reprise their roles, and actively disliking the female anatomy. Removing Miss Bellum from the show because her chest is way too big, and then reducing Miss Keen's chest, despite the fact that the same show introduces a gorilla character named Barbarous, who only wears a tube top and skirt, and a retired superhero named Grinwig, who has a costume that shows her legs, both of whom show off way more skin than those two other characters do, heavily indicating that this show has no clue what it wants to do with itself or who it wants to be aimed for. Does it want to be for kids? Well, considering the fact that this show does not introduce anything to its audience, nor does it feel welcoming, that's out of the question. Adults? Nah, they'd find this blatant pandering piece of garbage to be way too intolerable to sit through. Fans? Heck no. And despite the fact that the show tries to be way more squeaky clean than the original, the show is somehow more unpleasant to sit through, thanks in part to the show's portrayal of sibling relationships. Nearly every single episode of the show has the girls either fighting, bickering, screaming at each other, or giving off the feeling that they really don't like each other. And it really speaks volumes that these versions of the girls don't care about each other, when in one episode, Bubbles and Buttercup were willing to trade Blossom's soul in order to get a motor sled, while also not even feeling any sort of guilt or remorse for doing so. And in The Spoon, when Bubbles was wanting to burn Blossom, her sister, alive. And Professor Utonium is not making things any better either, because he also shows at many points that he doesn't care about his daughters. The Power of Four reveals that he only wanted to create a perfect little girl because he wanted to compete with one of his rivals who created the perfect little boy. So all of that nuance that he had in the original series is completely gone now. Forget Luke Skywalker from The Last Jedi. This is the biggest character assassination to ever happen to a fictional character in media. They turned the Professor, one of the most supportive and intelligent characters from the original series, into an absolute idiot. And not only is he an absolute idiot in this show, but he also blatantly gets the girls put in actual danger at times. Seriously, what was even going through his mind when he thought that it was a good idea to lock all three of his daughters and Mojo Jojo in the same room with each other, while also saying that one of them was going to turn into a porky swine monster? He said it himself. This porky swine monster basically eats anything that it sees in one bite. I know that Professor Utonium was the one who was infected,
Despite it making zero sense at all.
but the fact that he was under the impression that one of them was going to turn into this monster and potentially eat the three of them, while also not caring about it or putting them in separate rooms, is absolutely despicable. But it's not like the girls treat him any better. For instance, in the episode Arachno Romance,
Which has the worst animation mistakes in the show.
the girls decide to sabotage the Professor and Sapna's relationship because they think the Professor is going to replace them with her, despite the fact that the girls live with him. Mommy Theorist from the original worked because the girls were trying their best to make the Professor happy, despite the fact that this mother figure,
Who was Sedusa in disguise.
was being horrible to them. Meanwhile, the girls had no reason to resent Sapna,
Outside of her turning into a spider.
but they only find out about this near the end of the episode. But I'm going to say the same thing about this show that I did with Family Dog, Ollie's Pack, and The Adventures of Bernie. All of this mean-spirited content would not be as much of a problem as it is in the show if the show had other content to make up for it. Because even though, yes, the show tries way too hard to be cool, but trying to be cool doesn't inherently make something bad. I've personally seen some people who have said that they like Quack Pack in the Mighty Ducks animated series despite this, but in Powerpuff Girls 2016's case, it does not do this at all, because just like Robot Boy, even if you were to take out every single problem with this show, the series is bland and unenjoyable. And while seasons 2 and 3 do a much better job when it comes to the action than season 1, there's not much to enjoy from it because the Reboot's version of the girls are so weak that there's barely so much as one episode of the show that don't involve one of the girls being captured or outnumbered by a monster. And the humor is just pitiful in this show. Robot Boy is much worse in regards to its humor, admittedly, but Powerpuff Girls 2016 is not far behind. With how extremely try-hard this series is, the humor matches this completely, with random musical numbers having a singer sing seeing what's going on, title card and announcements coming out of nowhere, or random things popping out of nowhere in general that are more confusing than funny. The episode Splitsville, for example, has Bubbles trying to resolve this problem regarding a farmer, a duck, and a fox, while also having to solve the problem regarding all of these other things, including D Dastardly from Wacky Races showing up. That's not funny, that's just random, and there's no other punchline to it. And the show also constantly has Family Guy cutaway gags that are also random as well, and again, there's no punchline to any of them. Give Family Guy some credit. At least you could say that Family Guy tried to tell jokes while doing this, and heck, you'd get more laughs out of an episode of Back at the Barnyard than this show. And this isn't even a show that you could judge on its own merits either, because the show constantly implies that it's supposed to be a follow-up to the original show, not its own thing separate from the original. Judging from the fact that they decide to try and do a flashback to Bubbles in kindergarten by using the style of the original series, and also showed a screenshot of one of Blossom's memories from the original show. Another show that I'd much rather be watching, by the way, and that's another reason as to why I dislike this show, alongside the other 3 shows that are in my bottom 4 for Sean's network reviews, a lot more than Teen Titans Go. With Teen Titans Go, you could at least make the argument that the show wasn't supposed to be taken that seriously. The show was wanting to be a comedic spinoff of Teen Titans, not try to be a sequel to Teen Titans. I mean, if it was intended to be a sequel to Teen Titans, it'd be a much worse show, admittedly, but that's not what it was setting out to do. That doesn't absolve the show of criticism, of course, and the critic addressing episodes are absolutely abysmal, but it has an excuse. Powerpuff 2016 is supposed to be a follow-up to that original show, which could explain exactly why the show doesn't even bother reintroducing its characters to the audience, while at the exact same time, the show has this weird amalgamation of too many changes, but not enough. The show decided to drop a majority of its rogues gallery of villains, and only decides to keep Mojo Jojo, Princess Morbucks, and him. The others are either relegated to background extras, or they got majorly trucked over. The Amoeba Boys got one episode that they are the antagonist of, admittedly, but the Gangrene Gang have been reduced to a gambling plot, and Fuzzy Lumpkins got trucked over the most, not even getting so much as an episode where he's the antagonist, even one time. Thankfully, Jim Cummings ended up getting lucky the year after this with Lord Boxman from OKKO, and the new villains that they made for this show are either extremely lame, forgettable, or are just plain wrong. In the rogues gallery of the Powerpuff Girls, who is going to be talking about either the Nat or Manboy? Answer: absolutely no one. The Nat's only gimmick in this show is that he's literally just Roach Coach from the original show, but he's treated as a joke where the characters say his name wrong, a joke which the show constantly runs into the ground, and Manboy is basically a stereotypical straw man, no pun intended, of what the show thinks that men are like. Certainly not hiding what this show thinks of the male gender, if other episodes are anything to go by, while Allegro in his first appearance legitimately hypnotizes Blossom and Bubbles to do that dance in one of the most infamous scenes in the entire series. Bianca Bikini and Barbaras Bikini are fashion stereotypes, Packrat is obsessed with shiny things, and Silico's backstory makes zero sense. Which reminds me, the show also lacks its own identity as well. I get that with the reboot, it's expected to respect the original source material, otherwise it would alienate fans of the original property, and all while the show is basically making decisions that spit all over the original, the show barely does enough to make it feel like it's trying to do something new to change up the status quo. For instance, why are the main girls still 5 or 6 years old in this show? Like, they don't even act like they're kindergartners anymore. They act more like older preteens, if you know what I mean. So why didn't they just age the girls up by a few years? But then I remembered that this show has Bliss, and her design is absolutely horrible, indicating that alongside not knowing how to make the girls look visually appealing for a few seconds, with how much they go off model in the first season, they also really don't know how to age the girls up, despite the fact that the original show had an episode that laid the groundwork for them making versions of the girls that are older. Granted, these were from the episodes that were done by Chris Savino, and what he did was a whole other can of worms in of itself, but all you need to do is take inspiration from those designs to make another version of the girls, and that's about it. And the show does not hide its resentment towards the female gender as well, given that not only do the girls constantly have to get saved by the guys, but all of the female female voice actresses have been replaced. Blossom, I really don't mind her voice that much in this show, but Bubbles and Buttercup's new voices really bother me, mainly because of the fact that Bubbles' voice in this version really does not fit her at all, and Buttercup's new voice sounds exactly like the voice actress was trying to do a male voice and ended up becoming the voice actress for Buttercup instead. And do I even need to go into detail about the animation in this show? The animation in this show just does not fit Powerpuff Girls in the slightest. This honestly feels like the animation that was supposed to be for an original show that Bob Boyle and Nick Jennings probably tried to pitch, but it didn't go through, and Cartoon Network gave them this show as an assignment instead, which is very plausible because, fun fact, Planet Sheen was supposed to be called Red Acres and was about a fast food worker being launched into space, but we got Planet Sheen instead. Because one notable aspect about the original Powerpuff Girls is that it's a very fast-paced kind of show that tried to appear as being a don't judge a book by its cover show. And while it was very much inspired by anime, it was not trying to shove it in your face, something which Powerpuff Girls 2016 does a lot. The facial expressions that the girls make are literally nightmare fuel, and on top of that, something that this show does not seem to understand is that Powerpuff Girls is not Ren and Stimpy, nor is it SpongeBob. Because the show constantly has them making these big, over-the-top expressions, it makes the show extremely jarring to watch, and the show doesn't even seem to be built to be like this in the first place. Powerpuff Girls 2016, on the surface of things, seems to want to be a show that tries to be squeaky clean, until all of a sudden, you have the girls doing these expressions, and as a result, you question what the show wants to be again. The first season is the worst in this regard, where there are blatant animation mistakes that casual viewers would notice, and the girls are constantly seen going off model, even during moments that don't involve them making over-the-top expressions. And me being an artist myself, even when the girls look slightly off model, they look very uncanny, to the point where I'm conflicted on which has worse animation, the first season of this show or the Tom and Jerry comedy show. But that series came out during a time where technology was not as strong. Meanwhile, this show came out in 2016. The animation did admittedly get better in seasons 2 and 3, but remember, the writing comes first before the animation, and that aspect is basically moot at this point. Alright, so now that we're reaching the end of the video, it's time for me to get very quiet now. So, in a fight between which thing I reviewed in Sean's Network and yearly reviews is worse than the other, Ivan the Incredible or Powerpuff Girls 2016. Ivan the Incredible is still worse, because that movie can do much more harm to someone if they actually did take the message that it taught at face value. But both of these products are horrendous for completely different but similar reasons at the same time. Ivan the Incredible's only purpose for existing is just to be harmful. All of the ableism, body shaming, mean-spirited content, and the messages in that movie only serve a purpose of causing harm. Powerpuff Girls 2016 only existed so that Cartoon Network could milk the franchise bone dry. They did not care about whatever was thrown into this show. The soullessly manufactured feeling, the unpleasantness, the desperate attempts to be cool, the character assassination, and the blatant animation mistakes, they did not care one single bit about any of it. And to put it into perspective about how drained that this show makes me feel, in watching every single show in preparations for my review, no other show made me happier to finally finish than the animation equivalent of chores than this one. To recap, Robot Boy made me angry. Thundercats Roar annoyed me. Family Dog made me upset and uncomfortable. Powerpuff Girls 2016 drained me. And unless I come across another series during Sean's Network reviews that somehow manages to break me, I have all confidence in saying that Powerpuff Girls 2016 is one of the worst things that I reviewed on my channel, animated or not. If you guys excuse me, I need to watch a show to get my spirits back in shape. Whether if it's a show that I like or a movie. Whether if it's the Patrick Star Show or a show that I already watched but would rather be watching like PPG Original, Chowder, or OKKO. Just to wash this literal piece of corporate sludge out of my mouth.